right? So Gaurav, we'll have you address the audience, and perhaps then we start with a little Q&A with you and me and the students. So we'll leave it to you.
Fantastic. So good afternoon, everyone. And I see we have guests from all over the world today. So welcome to India. Which countries are represented here?
Ecuador, Indonesia,
Nice. So I hope you're enjoying your stay here. So this topic of sustainability is been around for a long time. It used to be called sustainability, now it's called ESG. But in that entire transition, I think one common factor has been people are always been confused about what this is, right? So for some people, it's to do with the environment. For other people, it's to do with some community work. Other people think it's sustainability of profit. So just before we even begin the discussion and the conversation, have you guys heard about the subject, and what do you guys know about sustainability? We're about to say something. Yeah.
So at least for me, sustainability is anything that can be maintained over time. So ecological sustainability refers to something that can be maintained over time without hurting the environment, financial, making money, and so forth.
Absolutely. So it's the long-term sustenance of anything. Sure. Anything else?
Resources which can be saved now for the future uses.
So saving resources.
Yeah.
Very similar ideas, keeping things running for a long time. What about others?
Conservation and preservation of resources.
Conservation, preservation. Similar themes.
Without affecting the ecological balance.
Without affecting the ecological balance. So why is this topic become such a hot topic? Why is it a trending topic? Why is it something that companies and organizations and civil society and all of you, I hear that you're all creating business plans for sustainable businesses, right? So why is this topic so important for today's day and age? Climate change, absolutely. Anything else?
Depletion of resources.
Yeah. So I'll give you some very, very interesting facts. So how old is planet Earth? Around about 4 billion years old, right? How long have humans been on the planet? Few million years? Anybody else got a different number? We've been around for about 200,000 years, at a blink of an eye. And in those 200,000 years, we've never crossed 1 billion people until about 1800. So it's only 250 years ago that we crossed the billion number, right? So billion people on the planet. Since 1800 till today, where are we today? What's the number?
8 billion.
8 billion. Right. So in 250 years, we've done what we were not able to do in 200,000 years. Let's just think about that. And around the world, as we add more people to the planet, there is also a growing need for these people to live higher quality lifestyles, right? So the lifestyle of the West, as we call it here in India, but the European, North American model, right? So which is consumption driven. Now, what happens when you have a high consumption driven model? Those of you who are in Philippines, Indonesia, even Ecuador, would be very familiar with what's happening when there's high rates of consumption.
Pressure on natural resources, deforestation.
Pressure on natural resources. Yeah. So no matter where you look on the planet, which natural resource, whether it's water, whether it's soil, whether it's land, forest, food, there is a tremendous amount of pressure. What happens if there's a lot of pressure from a lot of people for finite resources? Best case scenario, the cost of those things goes up. Right? So I'm kind of relating this back to why, as folks who are about to start businesses, why sustainability is a theme that you should all be thinking about. Worst case scenario, there's conflict. And people go to war over resources. The third piece, if you add to this puzzle, is climate change. Right? So you have lots of people demanding finite resources, and you add climate change, which comes with a whole set of pressures itself. And suddenly you've got a scenario which is completely up for grabs. We don't know what's going to happen. Right? So the moment the temperature hits 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees higher than what it is today, we don't know what's going to happen. So I'll give you another fun fact. What's the average temperature of the planet today? North Pole, South Pole, equator, desert, ocean. What's the average temperature? 30 degrees?
25.
25 to 30.
No. It's about 14 degrees, right? Go back to the last ice age, about 500,000 years ago. What do you think would the average temperature of the planet then?
Single digit.
8 degrees? 10 degrees?
Less than 5.
Less than 5 degrees. 10 is the right answer, right? So when the world was frozen over, we were about 10 degrees. Today, the normal temperature that we all are familiar with, we're about 14. A gap of 4 degrees takes you from where we are today to complete ice age, right? So think about when you hear in the news that the temperature is going to go up by 2 degrees, 3 degrees. A lot of us feel, what's the big deal, right? That fluctuation happens on a daily basis. But when you make it an average temperature across the world, that 2 degree, we don't know what's going to happen, right? So you could have droughts, floods, all kinds of natural disasters. And you're seeing that increasingly across the world, right? So in all of this, as you design your businesses, as you look to build something out for the future, if you don't understand this basic chemistry that's happening around the world, it becomes challenging. So this is a conversation where big business enters, right? So many years ago, because of the size and scale of what big business, the kind of impact that we are able to have on society, right? Both the positive impact as well as a negative impact. A lot of questions started getting asked about how is business responding to the pressures coming from climate change, natural resource depletion, etc. Also, how is it taking responsibility for some of these actions, right? Because we consume a lot of resources, we pollute the atmosphere, we pollute the air. So what are we doing around all of these factors? And that's when big business started responding. There's a very common philosophy in management, and it's called what gets measured gets managed. So are you all business students or are you BTech? So make it closer. Okay. But generally, if you're thinking business, what is the one metric that all of you are chasing? Profits. So you know how to measure that, and if profits go up and down, you'd figure out what to do about it. When it comes to environmental impact, when it comes to social impact, generally, historically, we never used to have metrics. And so this field of sustainability and ESG, what we've tried to do is build the metrics in so that when you're running your companies, then you know what to measure, what to manage, right? And then each business has its own unique set of metrics. So somebody in the apparel sector will have sourcing of cotton, or what are you doing with the dyes, etc., etc. Someone like us in the natural resource will have impact on biodiversity, impact on water systems, etc. And so there's a lot of things to grapple with. But as companies have started doing it, what we've seen is that there's been a gradual improvement and uptick in how we manage the rest of the business, which is why companies are doing a lot of things. And now if you look at where we are today, with climate change as a hot topic, with all of these other things that we discussed, whether it's biodiversity or natural resource depletion, all of these are coming to a head, right? Innovation, technology, AI, all of these things are starting to play a role in this, and you're starting to see very, very interesting things emerge. And if you open reports, so everybody's familiar with an annual report that a company has, right, which talks about the finances of a company. But if you open that sustainability report, you see a lot of work that's happening. So I'll kind of leave it at that. Let's open this up for conversation. I think that's where the larger interest is. And just to give you a little bit of historical background, 10 years ago, I was also writing a business plan for a sustainable business. So if you have questions on that, we can discuss that as well.
Sure. So talking about the business plan, I think when Gaurav and I met, we together worked at this company called Emergent Ventures India, EVI. The Kyoto Protocol was very new at that time. And from my very little understanding, the Western world, for all the damage they had done to the environment during the Industrial Revolution, had to invest to compensate into the developing country, correct? In green projects. So this is when carbon trading, carbon credits, all of that was really talk of town. And this organization was setting up projects that would help businesses in the West and India generate carbon credits, right? I don't know what happened to the carbon credit theory. I think Kyoto went and the world changed drastically.
Quite a bit. I mean, there's still a lot of talk now with net zero targets and commitments that big businesses are taking around the world to restart something around carbon markets, carbon credits, but nothing as structured as it was during
That time.
10 years ago. Yeah.
Sure. Gaurav, debunk a myth for us. Not understanding this industry, right? I think it was very nice when you spoke about sustainability and the foundations of sustainability. You work for an organization, Vedanta. In my mind, when I see Vedanta or I hear about Vedanta, I can only picture mining, right? Acres and acres of land and mining and things just being dug away by mankind to build what we wish to build as per our own desires, right? One, explain to this, how do you justify mining? And then you also sometime back told me that 7 of the most important minerals that we need to go sustainable as a planet are taken care of by you. I mean, what's the linkage? I think mining is bad.
I think everybody thinks mining is bad. Go to a mine, I don't think anybody will say, wow, this is the best place on the planet.
And the most expensive products come from mines.
Yeah, but it's a necessary evil. There's not one single thing that you have in this room or anything that you'll use outside this room, which does not have the presence of some metal or mineral in it, right? And where does that come from? It doesn't grow on trees, you don't farm it, you dig for it. So then the question becomes, is if everything that we've built around us is so dependent on having metals in there, it's very, very important that the companies and the organizations that do this right? So there's, just like with everything, there's a good way to mine and there's a bad way to mine, right? And a good way to mine considers all of the environmental impacts, all of the social impacts that the company has, and takes mitigative actions to correct those. Easier said than done. These are very large organizations. Historically, I think there's a reason why mining has this image, right? The image that you get in your mind when you hear the word mine is, tough work conditions, pools of polluted water, forests cut down, deep pits, all of those things. Those are justified images. But the way that the mining industry is thinking about this work today is very, very different, right? So through very tough historical precedents, these companies have learned that this is not the right way to do it. And that's, we can go down each of those areas that I talked about, but for everything, there's now very clear standards and practices that mining companies are trying to put in, which reduce the impact. And they're very cognizant about it. So hopefully the mines of the future are much better and more technology driven than the kind of image that all of us have in the mind, in your mind.
Sure. While you are here to address us about big businesses and how they're dealing with sustainability, I think it's also of great relevance and it will be valued by us. If you also speak about sustainability across the whole value chain of consumers, one is of course big businesses. How are new businesses looking at sustainability? Is it a need to build sustainability in, or is it compliance? Are investors looking for businesses which are sustainable? And a lot of them will have a sweet spot because it gives you a better promise of a brighter future if you've got a good narrative or a good story around your brand. So how important really is it to build sustainability in a business model?
I would say it's very important. No two doubts. And I know for anybody starting out, your first thought is not how do I make this business sustainable from any of the dimensions that we just spoke about. You're trying to figure out your product, you're trying to figure out your service, you're trying to figure out where this customer is going to come from, you're going to figure out how you're going to pay your employees at the end of the month. So there's a lot of other pressures that any company starting out has to do. But the ground reality is that in many cases, if you don't understand all of these other external dimensions that sustainability talks about, it is likely that you will become a laggard because there is a lot of other competition coming who is thinking about this. We talked about natural resources or raw materials, right? Raw materials are getting more expensive. So if you don't understand where your sourcing of raw materials are coming from or how those price points will change, you'll not be as successful. If you don't understand what is the core conviction of your business, and I think you had heads up for tails before this, right? I'm sure when she spoke from her heart, and you could tell the passion behind that business. A lot of that is a sustainable way of thinking, right? Because there is a value creation that you're doing both for yourself and for society. And that's really the core of it. What gets measured and other things comes later, but at least fundamentally, if you have that concept going, I think it's starting.
Sure. I think I'll ask another question. All of us have been hearing about electric vehicles. We're all saying EVs are the new thing. Everybody wants to buy an EV. And now with vehicles and their driving range also getting increased, larger batteries, better technology, affordability, government rebates, EVs have become more accessible. They're only set to become more and more accessible. On the contrary, a lot of people say, well, you bought an EV, you're charging it at your home, but that electricity is still coming from resources which are not sustainable, which is still fossil fuel. So how do you justify a new consumer trend, moving towards a more electric revolution, but the source is not sustainable itself?
So I think it's important to understand that we will not become green overnight, right? Just because I want to become green does not mean I'll step out of this room and suddenly every action I take is going to be the best action for the planet. We are going to get there in phases in transition. So if I look at an EV and the way I charge it, the grid is getting greener every year. So it used to have 100% power coming from coal. Today, only 70% of that power comes from.
Is that India right now?
In India.
So 30% of the power that we're consuming is coming from sustainable green resources.
Yeah, from hydro, solar, wind, all of those.
Okay.
So, and that number is going to keep becoming more and more green. So fundamentally, 5 years down the road, you will actually be driving a vehicle which is greener to drive than it is today because the grid has changed.
Sure.
And a similar thing happens in any other technology, whether you look at renewables, you're replacing coal with aluminum, silicon, copper. So you are actually substituting, you're not eliminating at the moment. But the conversation is really what is a lesser of the two evils? The best answer is don't consume, right? But I don't think we are built that way.
So
So
minimalists.
yeah.
A founder's dilemma, right? Startup ideas with all accelerators, all angel investors, every startup founder will want to present an idea that shows revenue, scalability, reach, discovery, and profit really fast. And in doing so, obviously their models are only going to include things which make them more profitable faster and cheaper, right? So if I'm a food producer or if I'm an FMCG outlet or a producer of anything to eat, I have an option. I could really go for conventional packaging, which is plastic, which costs nothing or very less. In contrast, all of packaging today, which is sustainable, which is organic, is pretty much 2x. If normal, routine, everyday, every person packaging is 10 rupees, anything which is sustainable or comes from good source is 20. It's double. For a business to show revenue, justify it with the costs, it's really, really difficult for founders to justify why they're still taking that route. How do you still do it?
I think that's where conviction comes, right? That the question is no longer, I don't think the question is, do I want to build bigger? The question should be, do I want to build better? Right? And in today's day and age, better is responsible towards the planet, responsible towards society, and customers are picking up on that, right? So yes, it's 2x, but as a customer, I go buy that 2x as well, right? Because I know that, for example, when I buy my vegetables, the non-organic vegetable has a ton of pesticides on it, which has long-term consequences on my health. It has long-term consequences on the planet. I'll pay 2x for the organic variety of the same, right? Because there are other benefits. And a lot of people are realizing that. Plus, it's cool. I think if you just look at the packaging of any organic or any environmentally.
Wow, that's cool. It's green, it's got eco paint. Yeah, so speak to us about this. Okay, how many of you would actually, let's have a little litmus test in Gaurav's point here. Packaging, pricing, food. How many of you will actually be willing to spend more money to get food from a place which is sustainable or the packaging is more organic or better? Would you actually do it? Will you change your decision for that? Any hands?
1, 2, 3.
If I have the money,
If you have them.
example, if I don't have the money, I can do it even if I want to.
So
But the
what-
moment you have the money, you would switch, right?
I don't. But if I
The moment you do, yeah.
Okay. So you also did say that this was a trend that was picking up. As a marketer, I can tell you, one key marketing bucket or communication bucket that marketers are now building upon is this whole storytelling around sustainability. Is it faff? Is it really reaping benefits for the planet? I mean, all startups will include sustainable marketing and a nice story with them. Does it really do well for the planet?
Okay, so let's play the role of a very cynical person, right?
Okay.
Let's say it is fair. Let's say it's greenwashing. Right?
Greenwashing is the
Yeah. I say that this carpet is recycle, it's 95% recycled, and I can wash it and reuse it at the end of life, all of those things, when in reality, none of that holds true. Right? I think your customers will catch you out much quicker than you anticipate.
True.
Right? I don't, in today's day and age, with all of the exposure that we have, whether it's social media, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's any of the things, just our own felt experience with products, I don't think you can sustain that greenwashing story very long. So sure, every brand today will have an eco and a sustainable in their marketing campaign, right?
Yeah.
But we know intrinsically, even though we might not understand the technicalities of it, we know intrinsically which one of those statements is true and which one of it is not.
Sure.
Right? Somehow we know this. And so over time, it's only those brands and those companies survive doing this when they really have those elements in their products and services. For all the others, then they become easy substitutes. Right? And I would easily replace this bottle with another bottle of another brand, because it's not really adding any value. But if I know that this is going to get recycled, and I know that the company is doing this for real, I perhaps would just take this particular brand.
How strong is this measurement metric for a country like India? We hear, of course, that our waste is getting segregated, dry, wet, separate. Medical waste is going separate. That's what's happening at our houses every day. At the national level, or at a city level, with Gurgaon, for example, how much of it is actually happening? I mean, how strong is the structure? Are there genuine efforts that are going into doing it, or are you of the view that when we try 100, we're still achieving 50, and 50 is good?
Yeah, I'm of that view, because I don't think you'll ever find a perfect solution or a perfect answer, right? And not in a complex country like India. And I would really, for those of you visiting us this week, I think the moment you step out on the roads, you'll understand that this is not an easy country by any means, right? We don't have binary, we have a lot of complexity. And I'm sure a lot of your countries also have that complexity built in. So I think it's important to head in that right direction. What's that? Great is the enemy of, or good is the
What is
enemy.
the enemy of great?
Yeah, so I think we need to strive for good, and we'll get to great eventually.
Sure. Point taken. Point taken. I think now I'm gonna just funnel it down.
Yeah.
For the good sake of the team here, and I've been asking this question to all speakers here. They're presenting on Thursday, and your view of building the perfect startup plan or pitch, give them a little structure or just an outline, and build sustainability into it.
You didn't ask me this question. It's a tough one. But I think just begin with the core purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, right? You've got to put a lot of energy into it. You're going to build plans out. You're going to try to create a market for your products. But why are you doing it? And that messaging has to be more than just this is the latest, most profitable thing to do. That would be the center of any conversation for the business plan. The rest of it, testing it out in terms of how the markets are going to grow, what's unique about your product, why is the price point that you've chosen the price point that will work. All of those become supportive of that core mission that you have, and that you've chosen that business for, right? But if you don't have that core vision, if you're just doing things for the sake of doing things, I think, at least for me, it'll be a much less compelling story. So find that core and really stick to it.
They have a requirement as part of their pitch where their ideas have to meet one or more of the UN SDGs. Which are the easiest SDGs they can build upon? How do they just still get that check? Versus which ones do you think
I
are the
will
most
never answer
prized
that
ones?
That's the wrong way of asking.
Give them some spot.
So I think if you go through the SDGs, one common theme that comes across, no matter whether it's zero hunger or eliminating poverty or climate or water or any of those SDGs, right? One theme that you will see across is around accessibility in the context of that particular SDG. And whether it's accessibility for all genders, whether it's accessibility for all socioeconomic segments, whether it's accessibility for people with different physical needs, all of those things are really what the SDGs are about, right? It's, at the end of the day, it's trying to create a more equitable society. And think about that in your product, in your business. Are you being able to bring some of that flavor in? And if not, I think it gives you a really good opportunity because it might open a whole new dimension about how you think about your product or your business.
But I don't know what the 5 teams and their presenting ideas are around. I haven't had that interaction with any of them. If you had to perhaps advise, even though very, very late for them, just 5 quick ideas in this whole ecosystem of sustainability, renewables, just talk to us at large, at a very macro level. What are the key themes of businesses which are sprouting up, which are coming up? And consumers are taking cognizance, or investors are taking cognizance, governments are considering them. what are some easy picks if they've got great intent and a good business plan? Some themes. Like packaging becomes a theme.
Yeah, so I mean, that's marketing, that's branding, right? And making sure. So I think today consumers are very quick at picking out the authenticity of what you're offering. And all of us, when we go and have to choose between product A and product B, tend to pick up products that we feel are more authentic, right? Provided price points are equal, let's say. So play around with authenticity, right? In terms of the investor question is very different for us, business starting out compared to a large business such as Vedanta, right? When an investor comes and speaks to me about money, they're trying to evaluate how risky this business is, right? If they put money into this business in 5 years' time, will they lose it because my plants have shut down because some community is protesting a pollution event that's happened? Right? So if I scale that down to something that's starting up, maybe just try and understand where are the biggest risks to your business coming? Are any of those risks in the social or environmental dimension? If the answer to that is yes, what is it that you're doing around this? Flip it. Are there opportunities in the environmental or social side that your product could address that you have left out because you were thinking about your product in a particular siloed manner, right? That also can open up doors and windows in terms of what you can do with your business. So on both sides, I think there are possibilities.
Sure. Let's make it open for questions.
Yeah.
Hoping we'll have some interesting questions. Start. Anyway.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Gaurav, for your explanation. I'm Duffy from Indonesia.
Sorry, I didn't get your name.
Duffy,
Duffy.
Indonesia. Yeah, I would like to ask in business or startups, we have several definitions of sustainability, also green. For example, in Europe, natural gas is supposed to be fossil fuel, but nowadays during the energy crisis, they changed the definition into green energy. And when we are going to do the pitch deck and also marketing our product as sustainability, how do you measure the acceptable level of categorized? It will be categorized as sustainability or also green products in each region. Because, for example, in India, you have different states where they have different characteristics and different people. So how do you measure that these products supposed to be sustainable and also green for these kind of markets? Thank you.
There's no one easy answer, but can you give me an example of what your product is?
If it's open.
If you're okay with it.
So the product is called, this product is called Happy Pow. It's a tea product from banana stem.
From banana stem.
Yes.
Nice. So inherently, it's already got all of those characteristics of being a sustainable product, right? Because you're taking a plant which had only one use in terms of the edible value of it, and you've converted it, made it two use at least, right? For products like that, I think it's important to just understand, are you going to be able to scale this up over a period of time? That's one of the questions that will come, right? But fundamentally, I would say you're in a great spot because you already have a product that inherently has the values of sustainability, which is reuse, which is looking at or reuse of multiple use, which is self-sustaining. Banana for Indonesia, it grows locally. You're not importing this from outside. Local communities grow it, so you're able to, spread that money into communities who need it. Hopefully, you have a labor model or a worker model where you're compensating your workforce fairly. So all of those things then become part of what makes it a completely sustainable business. And finally, If you're talking scale, then how would you sustain it, right? Because you would require water, you would require land space. How do you ensure that you don't cut into new forest areas to grow your product? So then those start to become considerations as your business grows. So think about all of those things. I think it would be also good, and it's not just for you, but everybody in the room, to put down on paper 2 or 3 metrics around sustainability that you would like to measure, right? So I'll give you an analogy. So I want to become $1 million business in 5 years, right? Can you also put a target that I want to pull down 1 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere in the next 10 years? Now that's a goal to aspire for. It has a sustainability mindset, and it allows you to think very differently rather than just chase a profitability or a cash bottom line. I hope that helps.
So you certainly have an idea with a good cause.
You had a question before.
Yeah, you raised your hand.
So let's say I'm having a business and most of the sustainable goals are not fulfilled. So should I compromise my business for that?
I say look deeper, because there might be 17 sustainability goals, but there are 160 targets within those goals. So it's impossible that you're not hitting
Any of them.
SDGs.
We are hitting few of them, but like for most of them, we are not.
See, again, I go back to you. This is not a checkbox exercise, right? Find what's core to your business. What is it that you're really impacting, both from a consumer value standpoint, but also from a planet or society standpoint? What is that problem that you're trying to solve? Once you get that, then it's easy to find in that list of 160 where your connections are. But I hope your evaluation is not whether they've met 5
The
out of
evaluation
17.
is going to be holistic. It's not a checkbox.
Yeah.
Like certainly you said, the 160 within the 17 matter. So let's see how many of the 160, but it's not, like you said, it's definitely not a checkbox evaluation.
Yeah.
I think it's the level of the impact, but it's not a checkbox. So yeah.
So I have this factor with me that it doesn't look good. It's like this event, we have arranged these bottles. Why? Because using a container and taking water from them, it doesn't look, but it is
Aesthetic.
because it's not sustainable at all.
I say
Plastic.
in certain cases, this has become so instinctual to us, avoid your first instinct. I'm not surprisingly, because I think the car is parked outside, but generally I'm carrying my own bottle with me,
Yeah.
right? No matter where I go,
Yeah.
whether it's a plane, doesn't matter. Whether it's a board meeting,
I
there's
feel
always,
supposed to
yeah.
use little
yeah.
bottles because these are not water bottles. These are we are not serving water. According to me, we are serving plastic.
Absolutely.
So, but again, it doesn't look good.
No, I think we have to kind of fight that instinct. And even if it doesn't look good, too bad, let that other person deal with it.
I think a lot of brands have taken cognizance. So I come from the hotel industry, which uses millions of water bottles every day.
Yeah.
The larger, better known brands have all switched to glass. We're all using glass
I'll give
bottles
you-
which are refillable.
I'll give you a story and this is from our days at EVI. We used to organize an awards, FEVI,
Green Business
Awards, right? And we were in one of the large hotels in Delhi. And I said, look, we don't want these plastic bottles. And they just didn't know what to do. Like, sir, we don't have,
They say,
yeah,
yes.
we don't have
They say,
jugs,
yes,
we don't have, yeah.
ask for it. So what do we do?
No,
What should be our
but they
answer?
didn't even have a solution. And 10 years ago, like, how hard is it to have filtered water and have 20 jugs in the room? But at that point in time, it doesn't look
It
good.
doesn't.
But I think now a lot more people, so the switches happen from there to taking this and emptying it into a jug and saying, oh, look, now I don't have plastic. To
It's not about all this was like
yeah.
It's an ideology.
you have cover for everything, like for the toothpaste, you do not need to
Yeah,
have the cover.
absolutely.
Still, it doesn't look good.
And I think as people building new businesses, right, these are all concepts that you can challenge. Why should all of us from,
Even though it's like money saving in
Yeah,
businesses,
I-
still they are using.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, all of us who've grown up in India know that our moms used to get dal and rice open, right?
Yeah.
It was never packaged. We used to take our own,
There was no packaging.
Yeah.
There was so much less waste.
and in 20 years that's changed. So I think challenge those norms as new business.
Question your instincts, like
Yeah.
you said.
Question you as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my biggest like conflict with this is like, are we actually doing something? Because versus this giant industry, my business, I don't know where, but I remember I read somewhere that if we could just make like magically the US disappear, it would do absolutely nothing for the planet on the stage we're in. And that means the whole country disappearing. We can do so much, create so much, sustainable as much as we can, but is it actually going to do something?
Yeah, no, I share your,
Worry.
I got asked this question, somebody else also asked me this, that the problem is so big, what we're doing is so small, will it actually work? And I share that anguish, right? Because the numbers will tell you something and the action that we're seeing will tell you something else. But as opposed to what, right? If you have a choice of doing two things, one, doing things the traditional, non-sustainable way, and a choice of doing the same thing sustainably, no matter how small that impact is, I would argue, do the sustainable thing, right? Because you're not the only one. There was a book I read very long time ago. It's called Blessed Unrest, right? And the whole premise of this book is that all around the world, there are small groups of people doing things to make their own communities better. Tiny efforts, right? But because they're so tiny that we don't see them at all. But it's all of those added up that if they were not there, then we'd probably be much worse off than what we are today. So yeah, don't lose hope, right? Hopefully we're wrong. We're not seeing that other side of the picture yet. But yeah, if you have two choices, choose the one that's more sustainable.
I think I'll just add here, there's this concept of tribes. There was a book of tribes, right? And it said you may create a tribe with something you're really, really passionate about. The tribe may just be as big as 3 people, 5 people. Across continents, countries, it's your interests which actually make you become part of a much larger interest group or a tribe. All of this adds up. So small initiatives, I think we're hearing so many stories about so much good being done in India, in remote villages and cities. Eventually, all of it is coming out. The more it's communicated about it, the more it just adds up.
I'll give you an example, and we've not seen the outcome of this yet, right? But just the fact that companies around the world today have taken net zero targets, right? That they'll reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to 0 by 2050. That's a goal that companies have taken. I was just doing some back of the napkin calculation. My company alone has pledged $5 billion towards this over the next 10 years. You multiply that by the top 500, about 80% of the top 500 have taken these goals. So the amount of money that in the last 2 or 3 years has been pushed into this area or will be pushed into this area is unprecedented. So hopefully we have a different story to tell 10 years down the road. But it won't happen unless we all actually do our bit, right?
So on the point of sustainability, what do you think is the driving force for both consumers and companies to opt for sustainability? Do you think it's urgency, or do you think it's publicity, or for the sake of compliance?
Just greenwash or is there real-
No, I mean, if the pure business answer is that's what's selling today, right? But dig a little deeper. For consumers, I think all of us in the room, we might be exceptions because we feel a little bit more about the planet. But hopefully we're not. But more and more people want that kind of product. So you're seeing that groundswell happen. So there's that demand. I talked about risk earlier. So investors are seeing that if you have a company or a project that is inherently risky, I make a car which is unsafe, that every time it has an accident, people die, right? So nobody's going to buy that vehicle, right? So you need to have additional safeguards in it. Or I have a product that has carcinogens in it. People stop buying those kind of products. So there is that risk element coming in as well. Regulation is changing as consumers are changing, as investors are changing, regulation. So these are all kind of feedback loops that are impacting each other. And that it's never perfect, but you're seeing so many. If you see the trend, it's only in one direction. It's not, there's no trend which is going the opposite way, right? And so that's purely from a cynical business mindset. If you follow the trend, you'll try to make a more sustainable business.
Over here first. Gentlemen, you.
So I'm asking more for opinion than a question. So like we evolved from bamboo bottles, animal skin bottles to metal bottles, then we got plastic bottles right now. Can we rather find a solution to make this sustainable instead? Because with the ever increasing inflation and as you know, the per capita income of an average Indian, it's $2,300, which basically is like 2 lakh an annum, and that's not sustainable if you actually go into core of it. So can we rather not make this sustainable and like get some solutions from the companies rather than making new companies which provide solutions which are not really solutions? Like, how about that?
Yeah, the road to hell is paved with good intent, right? That's the question. Yes, if you make this more sustainable, which means that you have a reverse distribution chain that allows the manufacturer to pick up all of these used bottles, recycles them, and converts them back so that you're not using virgin material every time you make a new bottle. That would be an ideal state, right? And there is concepts out there. There are concepts around circular economy, etc., which are trying to drive that way of. So I don't think there's going to be either or solutions, right? There's going to be all solutions trending or tending towards sustainability. So you will have the substitute material, but you'll also have the recycling of existing material. And all of those things have to work in order to ultimately bring down consumption demand. Because as long as we are in the market to extract and consume, we are going to be unsustainable, no matter what materials we use. So tomorrow we convert to bamboo, suddenly the demand for bamboo shoots up, which means that becomes unsustainable, right? We go to metals, demand for metal shoots up, that becomes unsustainable. So inherently we have to figure out how do we bring down the consumption curve, and that can only happen through reuse, recycling. So yes, do this better, and that's the solution as well.
Question.
So, I'm Ayush, and my question is, what is stopping your company to move its resources from mining fields to perhaps a waste, a waste center where you could first recycle the steel and the minerals we have, and then move on to mining to meet the demands? What is stopping the company to move its resources?
Instinct.
Instinct.
I mean, we talked about it earlier, right? That the instinct for a mining company is to go mine. That's the first instinct. But as these questions are being thought about and being asked, we and other mining companies are thinking about how do we reuse, right? How do we not go from virgin material? So to give you an example, when we manufacture aluminium, there is something called aluminium dross, which is, to describe it, is if you heat milk, the malai at the top, the cream at the top, That's what dross is. It's that very thin layer, which historically used to get thrown away. It has elements of, it has aluminum in it. So now we are doing stuff to extract that aluminum. The remaining residue can be used as raw material in the iron and steel sector. So sending that over. So at the end of the day, that waste is completely getting eliminated. Similarly, like our copper business is now looking at scrap and recycled metal. Or if you go to other companies like Aditya Birla, they have set up entire divisions which are only looking at recycled and scrap metals to produce their final product. So people are thinking that it needs to happen more. Urban mining, landfill mining, all of those concepts, I think maybe startups, you start a mining company which does that, right? Give the old boys a challenge, and that's.
But wouldn't it be a subject of competition for the companies? Suppose I go out and start a recycling company. Let's say I start recycling lithium. So, and we just found a big, reserve of it in Jammu and Kashmir. So, wouldn't it be a subject of competition? Wouldn't the big players come and punch me out of the market?
Yeah, so I mean, but competition is good. We've always, Tesla was nobody until now. Tesla is now the most inspirational brand for auto manufacturers. Right? Everybody now is making an EV, whereas these same brands were trying to sabotage electric vehicles 20, 30 years ago. So I think that's the way that new businesses grow.
Suppose we want to recycle a mineral or like a resource which is not properly collected at first, rather let alone separated. Let's take an example of lithium as before. So how a new company approach that, to collect the waste? Like it's not collected properly, is it? So we throw away our batteries in the dustbin. So where do we get the initial waste?
I think that's where the beauty of good business people comes in, right? They figure these things out. They figure out how do you collect this waste from entering the waste stream. How do you make that profitable? How do you kind of break down the component parts? That's the beauty of business. That's what governments can't do. And entrepreneurs like yourselves can play that role. So play that role. You'll fail, great. At least you will move the needle. Somebody else will come along.
Start some action in that area.
Right. And one last question. It's my last. So my question is, suppose you go after this, you go to your client and you tell them that you have both the options available for the same price. One is recycled iron ore and another is just plain old virgin metal, right? So would it be a challenge to convince them to buy the recycled one? Would they hesitate before buying the recycled one, or would they prefer to go for the recycled one?
So the ideal state is happening now. So any of the large brands in the world, so whether it's an Apple or a Volvo or a Ford, any of these consumers of metal are paying a premium for low carbon, zero carbon metal. So there is a demand for that.
Okay.
And in fact, Europe is now they're creating a regulation called cross-border adjusted mechanism. It's hotly debated, hotly contested, but essentially what it says is if I'm importing something into Europe and that product has a higher carbon footprint than the same product available in Europe, then I'll have to pay a fee for it. And so it's inherently happening, and people are demanding this. Because let's say, so Vedanta has its net zero commitments, right? So we say that we will make our metals zero carbon by 2050. Tata also has the same, Ford also has the same, Volvo also has the same. So all the consumers of my metal also have those targets. And the way that they will achieve those targets if they are sourcing zero carbon. So there is this complementary ecosystem that's developing, which is good for everybody.
but it is making a very big hole in your profit. You go for that technology right now and implement it because you want to be sustainable. You are going to wait 10 years so that it gets cheaper. What is you are going to opt for? You are going to opt for a cheaper technology which is sustainable and doesn't bring a hole in the profit, or you will go a expensive technology. If sustainability is good.
So I'll tell you how we cracked that problem.
Customers.
Yeah. I'll tell you how we cracked that problem.
So, like, you have that, conscience, saying, okay, I will go for sustainability and I don't.
So what is important to a business person? Profit, right? Profitability, IRRs, all of those numbers which say that there is a certain return at the end of the day is what's important. There is a concept called internal carbon pricing. So I'm anticipating that 5 years down the road, there'll be a carbon tax. So if my product has an inherent carbon footprint, that carbon footprint will be taxed at a certain rate. So what we've done is we've created something called an internal carbon price, which we add to every decision that is being made. So you have decision A, which is more expensive, less polluting. Decision B, less expensive, more polluting. In the olden days, you would go with decision B. Now, because of the sustainability commitments, etc., what we've done is we've introduced an ICP, internal carbon price. That ICP gets tagged on. So because product B is more polluting, I'd end up paying a higher tax, notional tax on that in the future. And that changes the rate of return. And so now my management knows, okay, today with no tax, option B makes sense, but should there be a tax 5 years down the road, this will become less profitable. So they'll be incentivized to go to option A. So that's kind of how companies are doing it. It's not perfect yet. It's still, fits and starts, but this is how you kind of change the equation.
At the end, you will companies to go sustainable just by giving a whole profit. By implementing this carbon pricing, giving a whole, that's the reason they are going for sustainability.
Making it more expensive for businesses to operate if they're not sustainable. Okay, I think we'll have one last question, and then we close the session. Any last questions here? Great. So I think on a lighter note, we perhaps would have been a very good idea to have Gaurav on our jury as well. And going by his expertise, I'm sure a lot of your business ideas would need a lot of reworking over the next 24 hours. But we're very glad we don't have him on the jury for this time.
I think all of you must have done a fantastic job thinking about what needs to be done. So I wish you all the best, and I'm sure whoever's on the jury will really enjoy listening from all of you.
Yes.
That was indeed very informative, sir, and gave us impeccable knowledge. We are heartily grateful for your words. Thank you, sir. We now would like to invite Dr. Malini, Senior Academic Leader, Senate Education, to present the memento to Mr. Gaurav Sarup.
Dr. Malini. It's very fortunate that we have Dr. Malini here. She's just definitely coming from the airport, so we just took the advantage of it.
Thank you so much. Done. And we shall wrap this up after a very customary photograph of all of us with you.
Fantastic.
So please oblige while we all gather for a nice shot. Come on.
Again,
Of course.
just come.
Do a selfie.
have
Let
a
people.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, you can hand up
We'll
one
have
of
it
the
here.
places.